Okay Rusty, listen up. Hi everyone, my name is Anna, and today I'm going to tell you a story about something that sounds impossible. What if I told you that a long time ago, the political parties in America kind of switched places? Yep, switched. Let's rewind the clock. After the Civil War, most Black Americans voted for the Republican Party. Why? Because Republicans were the party of Abraham Lincoln, the president who helped end slavery. Back then, the South was mostly controlled by Democrats, but many of those Southern Democrats supported segregation and unfair laws that stopped Black people from voting. For many years, Black voters in the South were pushed out of politics by literacy tests, poll taxes and threats and violence, so even though Black men technically had the right to vote after the 15th Amendment, many couldn't safely use that right. Now fast forward to the 1930s. During the Great Depression, President Franklin D. Roosevelt created programs called the New Deal to help poor Americans. Many Black families benefited from those programs. Slowly, some Black voters began supporting Democrats. But the big shift happened in the 1960s. President Lyndon B. Johnson signed two powerful laws: the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Voting Rights Act made it illegal to block people from voting because of their race. Suddenly, millions of Black Americans could register and vote without unfair barriers. And when more people vote, more leaders can rise. Before 1965, there were only a handful of Black members of Congress. After voting rights were protected, something amazing happened. Black communities began electing Black mayors and representatives. Cities elected leaders like Carl Stokes, the first Black mayor of a major U.S. city, Maynard Jackson, Harold Washington. At the same time, many white Southern voters who disagreed with civil rights laws began moving to the Republican Party. The South became mostly Republican. Black voters became one of the strongest supporters of the Democratic Party. That big change is called party realignment. And here's what I think is the most important part of the story. When people were finally allowed to vote freely, representation changed. Voices that had been silenced started being heard. Leaders who looked like the communities they serve were elected. So when we talk about voting, we're not just talking about politics, we're talking about power. We're talking about history, and we're talking about how one law, protecting the right to vote, can change the future of a whole country. And that's the story of how the parties switched places. So when I learned that the political parties switched places, I thought that was the end of the story, but it's not. It's actually the middle, because now, it's our turn. The people who marched, the people who were turned away from voting booths, the people who stood in long lines after the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed. They didn't fight just so history books would have something to write about. They fought so we would have choices. They fought so we could raise our hands in class and ask questions. They fought so we could grow up knowing our voices matter. When I look at young people today, I see something powerful: students organizing, teens learning about laws, young leaders speaking up at school board meetings, first-time voters researching issues before casting a ballot. We're not just watching history, we're living in it. And here's what gives me hope: every generation has a moment where it decides what kind of future it wants. The generation of the 1960s chose courage. They chose to demand fairness. They chose to protect voting rights. Now it's our generation's turn to choose. We can choose to stay informed, to ask hard questions, to respect different viewpoints, to protect the rights that others sacrificed for. The power of young people learning, thinking, and participating, that's always been the real force behind progress. So maybe the real lesson isn't just about parties switching places. Maybe the lesson is this: when people vote, when they organize, when they care, history moves. And one day, someone might be telling a story about us, and I hope they'll say, they didn't waste their chance. The story isn't over. It's just beginning.